Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Creative Confidence Podcast. I'm Suzanne Gibbs Howard, founder of IDEO, and I am excited to welcome you to this session. We always have great conversations with leaders about creativity, leadership, innovation, and growth, and today will be no different. I always invite our community to join in with the conversation, so please let us know who you are and where you are today. We are thrilled to have you joining us. And so I can see we've already got some folks in from Brazil, Northern Ireland, others here in California, Canada, Vermont, Taiwan. So we're getting good global representation from Oklahoma City to Shanghai. So welcome, everybody. Today, we have a really important conversation. We're going to talk about one of the most critical challenges that our global community faces. And this is about how will we work to decarbonize our planet? I'm sure that many of you have seen the IPCC report that the UN put out a couple of months ago. And this had a distinct warning in it that the continued rise of greenhouse emissions could soon detrimentally outstrip many of the communities in the world to be able to adapt and respond to this dire situation. We know that people all across the globe are viscerally, personally experiencing climate change. We have wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, heat waves, floods happening all across our planet. We know that consumers are starting to vote even more steadily with their wallets and going to companies and brands that are having behaviors with regard to the climate that they agree with. And we know that businesses are starting to really feel this. They know that regulations are coming. Organizations like the SEC are starting to put new rules into place that require disclosures about climate behaviors of companies so that investors make more informed decisions. So all of this is happening. And at the same time, so many of us, especially as leaders in different organizations, still aren't sure exactly what we need to do. And so that's why today I have two people with me who are going to help us with different facets of this conversation from a business and an investor perspective. So please allow me to introduce Maria Fujihara, who's going to talk with us about the business perspective. She is the founder and CEO of a company called SINAI Technologies. And SINAI really helps to provide organizations with the technology necessary to build their own deep decarbonization strategies. Maria has a fascinating background. She's an architect and urban planner. She's worked for over 13 years in sustainable certifications and buildings. She worked with the Brazilian Green Building Council. She was an advisor to the highly respected Project Drawdown, and she's a grad of Singularity University. Also, from the investor perspective, please welcome Gabe Kleinman. He is the head of portfolio services and marketing at Obvious Ventures. And Obvious has an extensive portfolio of sustainable systems companies that they work with. And Gabe works across all of their companies to help build resilient and values-driven operations. Gabe has a fascinating background. He's been at Medium, he's been at IDEO, he's been at Creative Artists Agency, and in all of these organizations, he's worked across marketing, product, people, and also in their foundations to help connect that constant through line about not just for-profit businesses, but ones that do both social and environmental good. So welcome, Gabe and Maria. I'm very excited to have both of you here today. I have one last question for our community, and then I'm going to dive into the conversation with Maria and Gabe. But community, I am curious to ask you, when I say, what comes to mind when you think about leading the organizations that you're in to decrease the negative effects that you might be having on the planet? What are the kinds of things that come up for you? You're trying to help your organization decrease the negative effects it has on the planet. I know for myself, I think of things like flying less, the kinds of meat that we might have in the office. I see from people things about people over profit, a generational disconnect, the waste that comes in. shared ownership, review of supply chains, reducing office travel. I'm going to turn to Maria and start with the same question. Maria, can you tell us what comes up for you when you think about the ways that different organizations can downplay or downturn the negative effects that they have on the planet?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I think when you ask this question to a person, I think the first thing that comes to mind is how me as a person can reduce that impact. And of course, this is so important. I've been a vegetarian for over 10 years now. I bike to work. I have an electric bike. We're mostly remote, but for me, as being in this space for so long, I think these are, behavioral science is always one of the hardest ones to convey and to rely on, because it's behaviors, but and it's also not it doesn't make a huge impact when you think about reducing those small little pieces altogether. And for me, playing the biggest impacts has always come from the private sector and from the big corporations. That's why we are focused on those. I think they are the ones that can make a real change, and they have the money and the willingness, and now the regulations that are going to make them to take that step forward. So I think I've always been trying to focus on the biggest impacts, and I would say that the private companies that are in carbon intensive sectors is the biggest impact, or the ones that have the biggest opportunities for reduction, at least in my
And those carbon intensive sectors are?
Yes, they are any company that has physical assets, so and that are producing goods and impacting the environment, such as transportation, agriculture, metals and mining, manufacturing, to name a few.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. And Gabe, I'm curious to ask you the same question when I ask you about the ways that companies can help to decrease the negative effects they're having on the planet. What are the things that you think of?
Yeah, I'm going to plus one everything that Maria said. When you look at all of those carbon intensive industries, it's really not one industry in particular. It cuts across nearly our entire economy. And so you can look at it in two ways. One really is at the corporate level and what products or services the organizations are creating, but also, and I'm seeing a lot of this in the chat. The chat this is extraordinary how many people are weighing in with their thoughts. Our individual behaviors also have an extraordinary impact. How we get to work, what we eat, all of those things that in and of themselves are also connected to the ways that companies operate, not just the products and services that they produce, but how they go about their businesses and their business operations every day.
Yeah, definitely. Great. Well, that sets the stage for a great conversation. And thank you, everyone, for everything that you're sharing. I love seeing all of your thoughts. What I wanted to do was really sink into a very specific example. And so we would love to talk about how SINAI Technologies began. But Maria, could you start us off by just telling us exactly what does SINAI Technologies do?
Yes, of course. So we are a decarbonization platform. We are an enterprise software that is focused on carbon intensive industries. And we basically help companies. We're very focused on the carbon accounting piece, but we go much beyond the accounting. We help them to not only identify the sources of emissions and calculate them, but also find the technological roadmap, or basically define what is all these new technologies that they can implement and replace their old and polluting operations to be able to actually transition. So we connect not only the activity and operational data, but also financial data, so they understand the costs for reduction and the costs for transitioning. That's basically what we do.
Okay, so it's the data tracking, translating that into accounting and dollars or financial data, and then helping them transition and make those changes, new ideas, new ways, and then keeping the tracking and accounting all going. Fascinating. I'm curious, how did you even get this idea for what you've created in the first place?
How did I get this idea? Well, I've been working in this space. Is this the time that I tell my story?
Yes.
Okay. I came from a family of parents that are in the same space. They are both forest engineers. We're from Brazil. And so I think I created this passion or connection to the natural environment very early in my life. And I started my career, like you've mentioned, in the sustainable construction industry, because the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And if you create this, kids that are passionate about the environment, they are going to be the ones that are going to continue this thing for many years to come. And yeah, so I've always have tried. I'm more like a systems thinker, and I've always been trying to connect all these dots across, different companies or different types of data, different business needs, and I saw this opportunity of creating a software and this was about 5 years ago. So maybe a little bit early to market, but in a very good timing to actually build a product that matters for companies today. But I was trying to figure out how to give businesses an actual number of what is their impact and an actual number of how they can reduce that impact. And number that businesses understand is either financial or now much more the environmental piece. I'm an architect by training, and I need to quantify things with numbers. Of course, qualifying is important, but I think it's just very straightforward. So that's kind of how it started, but it's a process. It's a long process. It's not like I woke up with a vision and the next day I was building it. It was I was building this up for many years, and I think it started when I was a kid. So it's tough to say how the idea came into fruition, but I think it's a process.
Yeah, it's amazing. Certainly gives a lot of us hope that your parents infused these ideas into you, but then you are clearly running with it. I know what I'd love to jump to is that I know you brought some of the earliest prototypes that you were making as you were trying to figure out what this idea was and how to bring it to life. And I'd love to pop those up and have you just talk us through some of the things that you made when you were testing your concept and moving toward defining what product market fit might be.
Yes, I did. At the beginning, it was a lot of whiteboarding, a lot of that old thing as we know as pen and paper. So a lot of taking things out of my head and trying to put them, in a more organized way. But there is a bunch of like you can see how busy my head was that time, because I was trying to just take these things out of there and trying to organize some of these concepts. Then we started moving to more digital. So looking at screens, how they will look like in the screen. And this is early product sketches. I used to love, and I still do, use my iPad to make a lot of notes on things that look good, look bad, how I would like to see them, because it's just faster, quick interactions instead of, spending a lot of time and effort on putting this on a nice, much nicer prototype. And then we arrive at a very initial rough product UI that I'm not proud of, but I think if you are proud of your first sketches or even your first product, I think you've launched too late. It's so important to launch this early and get early feedback. This one has actually a funny story, because when we launched this to the customer, seriously, we spent a lot of time thinking of how the feel of this UI would give the user and the customer. But then we launched it to the customer, and the first feedback we got was that this is software from the 90s, that it looks very bad, that he hated the leaves behind there. He wanted the leaves out, and I was like, oh my God, I think I clearly didn't talk to him before launching this. So it was a great early exercise. And then moving from the UI perspective to which is the internal, product perspective, and going to the external website, how the brand feels from the outside. That was also another big step that we had to take, because at the beginning it's just your product. Your website looks okay, but it's normally at the beginning is very disconnected, and it was the same for us, very disconnected, trying to figure it out how this brand communicates externally. It's actually a big leap as well. So we were just doing initial sketches of how everything should look like, how we want to be perceived by customers. This was when we had only 3 customers. It has a much different look than today, but honestly, this feels like a big evolution. It always continues to evolve. I think we have a much better understanding of how these two things connect, the internal branding and product UI. And of course, now we have product UX as well.
Yeah.
And
so great.
Look, yeah.
Thank you. It's so great just to see how fast these ideas were evolving and how you were constantly making things tangible and sharing them with people to get their feedback as soon as possible. Gabe, I'd love to turn to you now. I know Obvious Ventures is an investor in Maria's company, and I'm curious if you can back up and tell us a little bit about why Obvious is investing in sustainable systems, and then what led you to believe that SINAI is poised for success.
Sure. So a little bit about Obvious. We are a venture capital firm that invests in purpose-driven entrepreneurs reimagining trillion-dollar sectors. And unlike many other investors, we are neither specialists, in one field nor generalists. We are a multi-thematic investor, and those themes map to the basic building blocks of life and society: food, transportation, housing, healthcare, many of which we've already brought up on this call as being quite carbon intensive, or at the very least, when you think of food and transportation and construction, those are probably, in addition to energy, those are the top carbon emitting industries in the world. And so when, this thesis that we had that founders reimagining these huge sectors, back in 2014, this was not a commonly held belief that purpose pursuing these big problems would outperform. Those were the go-go days of blitz scaling and hyper growth. But Suze, as you mentioned in your tee-up, we as people, just as citizens of the world, are living a completely different reality just 6, 7, 8 years later, as we experience greater and more dramatic climate events. And so this is now front and center for not only consumers, but definitely for businesses. And so of late, we've seen incredible resonance with the idea of these companies that are tackling these big problems, whether through a consumer demand or through regulatory action. And I'm seeing a couple of questions in the chat around, does it cost a business more or less money to start decarbonizing? I mean, you can ask yourself, a company that has a fleet of vehicles, if they decarbonize their fleet by getting a fleet of electric vehicles just 3 years ago, seems to me like they'd be in a better position than a fleet that's relying on $6.79 gasoline in California. Yeah. So for the companies that are visionary and looking to solve these problems, it feels like the earlier action, the better across all of these sectors. The question of why SINAI and why Maria, I think on the first, this is a growing category. Companies are going to be on the hook for understanding and mitigating their carbon footprint in the world. And this is you're going to see it out again, borne by demand from both consumers as well as in the regulatory environment. And, why Maria? I mean, she's a dynamic leader for sure, but you just heard some of her thought process right there. It was get it out, build it, iterate it, get feedback. And that works so well for so many reasons. And this philosophy and her brilliance were the reasons why we did back her. But if you map it back to a lot of IDEO's methodology, Joe Gerber and Diego, who are IDEO alums, I love this phrase that they had, which is "Don't get ready, get started." And that's really what Maria did. And then by incorporating your future clients and stakeholders into the process of the product development, you're also getting them to create some pride of ownership themselves. So you're not only getting the feedback, but you're also getting early buy-in. And so that's another reason why.
Fantastic. Thank you. Well, clearly Maria's venture sounds like an amazing opportunity for investment. Maria, though, I know with any startup, there are always challenges. I can't even imagine how many challenges you must face with a startup and a business that's focused on the challenging, complex category of climate change. I'm curious if you could share some of the business challenges that you've faced as you've been growing this from a seed of an idea to something that's really serving multiple enormous organizations today.
Yeah, I mean, so many challenges. I think, when I look back at my trajectory, at the beginning, it was really trying to figure out my work life in the US, right? How to establish myself here, get a visa, and meet people. So trying to connect, create a network at the beginning was my main goal. That was the biggest challenge. And then I trying to solve each problem as they come. I guess there's also a lot of challenges around people's mindset and how they perceive the business overall. But those are things that it's tough to change, right? I mean, they need to be there, so they in the same level of understanding, so they can understand what we are proposing, and understand the business opportunity. And those are mindsets that I cannot change, but I can change my mindset of how do I receive that feedback? What do I do with that feedback, and how I continue to move things forward? So I think I would say today, a lot of the big challenges that I have, I think are mostly in my head on how I coordinate all of these functions, right? And keep moving no matter what, because it has been showing, I mean, I've been proving it to myself that if I keep moving, things will happen, and keep working hard. And of course, being humble and understanding all of these concepts, how they are moving and evolving, and keep, positioning the business even more based on all these changes that the world is seeing right now.
Amazing. I mean, I can't even imagine. That's such a fascinating journey of the modern entrepreneur coming in, finding her feet on the ground here and building this incredible, impressive organization that's helping so many large companies make change. Gabe, you started to talk a little bit about this, about the overlaps that you see with IDEO's process design thinking, human-centered design, and the complex world of sustainable systems. Are there other patterns that you see where, even beyond Maria's organization, where the practice of design thinking and human-centered design can help with sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. When you there are some general evaluative rules for venture, and boiled down, you can look at it as 4 T's. You look at team, tech, timing, and the total addressable market. And when it comes to the total addressable market, I believe that you're seeing a huge increase in these industries that are shifting from being kind of dirty and dated into these new industries. So think about the electrification of all of our mobility systems, and how automotive technology used to be geared purely around the internal combustion engine. Well, there's an entirely new $1 trillion plus market emerging around electrified transportation. You can say the same thing about plant-based proteins as well as in the built environment, trying to find ways to decarbonize an extraordinarily carbon intensive and labor intensive and dangerous business. So it's almost these entirely new markets that are popping up. And, from a trend standpoint, that just means not blue ocean, but a tremendous amount of opportunity for entrepreneurs to come in and create those solutions like what Maria is doing with SINAI. There was no market for carbon tracking technology beyond probably just some basic ESG public markets reporting tools in Europe from, 15 years ago, if that. Now, this is a real business. This is a huge category. And so you're seeing this play out across what we classify as sustainable systems across the board.
Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing. There's so much. When I think about the work that Maria's done to say, how do I put a number on this very amorphous category and space of like what is my company doing that's damaging to the planet? Figuring those pieces of the puzzle out are so hard. And then figuring out, as you're saying, Gabe, the size of that opportunity are tricky questions indeed. And so this practice of really looping around and iterating and constantly building and learning as you go is starting by getting started is huge.
One quick thing that I'll add back to actually answer your question about where does human-centered design play in this. As these markets shift, there are huge and hidden opportunities that I feel like human-centered design has a unique role to play in really being able to unearth those not really well articulated unmet needs that are emerging in this new world. And so the need for IDEO's process and the human-centered design process is more important than ever.
Yeah, I feel like it's also that practice of because people can't even articulate what they might want and they don't know what could exist. How do you provoke them with those early stage prototypes so that people can say, oh, I didn't even know I needed that, but now I want it. So that's great. That's great. I want to turn a little, we'll go to questions from our community in just a moment. I'm here today with Maria Fujihara, who's the founder and CEO of SINAI Technologies, and Gabe Kleinman, who is the head of portfolio services and marketing at Obvious Ventures. Maria, I know we've talked a lot about you finding your way toward product market fit, but what about growth? Is there anything you can tell me about how you're thinking about your future and what you might be growing toward next?
Yeah, totally. I mean, growing and scaling a business that is already global business, we need a lot of partners. And again, just like I was growing my own network when I came here, now we need to scale this network globally and bring out all the help we can get. So we are actually partnering with a bunch of companies, organizations, nonprofits. We recently announced one with the RMI, the Rocky Mountain Institute, but we are actually getting some more many other organizations aligned, so we can, have the vouch of that our system needs in terms of calculation, auditing, and all that perception. But at the same time, bringing the private sector together so they can try to figure it out the solutions themselves with our help. So instead of passing the cost of decarbonization to the consumer, how they can actually absorb this cost and pass it or dilute it across their value chain. So what are the biggest polluters in the value chain, and how this value chain can work together to subsidize this cost that is needed. I mean, there is going to be needed money, a lot of money to invest in this. And the biggest question is, who pays for this, and how much do we need to pay now versus how much these costs are going to look like in the future, which is going to be much higher. So that's also the urgency of why they need to do this right now and not delay this longer. So I think these are some of the things that we are thinking. bringing a much larger pool of partners to continue scaling the business, and a lot of the costs. What are the costs associated with this, and how do we reduce these costs, or how do we better allocate these resources?
Yeah, I mean, Rocky Mountain Institute, congratulations on that. That's an amazing partnership. I think also what I'm hearing in that is this is not just sustainability, it's not just sustainable products, it's sustainable systems. And so you are connecting across complex partnerships so that you're distributing the benefits, but also distributing the problem solving across multiple organizations needing to come to play. Gabe, I'm curious, you look across so many diverse organizations, and Obvious has had multiple successes. I know Impossible Foods is one of the organizations you've invested in that is really shaking up with plant-based meat, and really turning an entire industry on its head. But what are some of the patterns that you see as organizations in the climate change space start to scale and grow? Are there any patterns across?
One of the big things that I've seen, especially from within our portfolio, we have a number of deeply technical founders and teams. Take Lilium, which is electric vertical takeoff and landing flight. I mean, these are flying electric cars. And Proterra, which is the largest electric bus company, and they build battery systems for heavy duty and medium duty vehicles. They're largest in North America. These are deeply technical founders and teams. And oftentimes you'll see technical folks who want to focus almost exclusively on the product and the idea that it will sell itself because there's a problem, they're building a solution, we're good to go. But I think there's been a developing sense of sophistication around the need for great narrative storytelling around what it is that they're building and how exactly it's going to improve people's lives. Because all of these founders, and Maria knows this as well as anyone, have so many different audiences that they're speaking to. You have investors, you have potential employees, you have the media, you have customers, you have so many different people who have different understandings of the technical nature of the problem and what type of solution it is that you're delivering. So we have so many founders now that have an understanding of its importance, this importance of storytelling and narrative, and then a much deeper sophistication around how to develop right time, right place messaging and the resolution of the technical story to tell at what times. And that gets me really excited.
Yeah, it's a huge piece of the puzzle. I think when I've seen across different technologies and startups and large scale companies working in this space of climate, it gets technical really fast. And so figuring out what is the right place to simplify and tell that story so that we can break through and get more people acting. It's one of the critical steps. All right, let's go to a couple of questions. We've got a lot of great ones. For either one of you, people are asking for more examples of defining the problem. Vanessa's asking, do either of you have a hidden problem that's on your radar that you wish more people were going after, even if it's not about SINAI?
A great question. You want to start, Gabe?
Sure, I'll go first. I have an easy answer to this. If you look at some of our biggest environmental challenges, and especially carbon, the new phenomena of the mega fire is a major problem. If you look at the California mega fires in 2020 alone, it undid all of the carbon progress that California had made across all industries for 2 decades. So if we cannot find ways to manage our forests better, then we're going to have a major carbon problem, and it will make a lot of the other progress that we make in other industries across our global economy, it's kind of in vain. So mega fires are something that would be, I think, really interesting to focus on. And there's a new fund Bill Clerico started this new fund called Convective Capital that is focused only on fire technologies into helping both mitigate mega fires, but also to help with forest resilience.
Wow. Yes. I see some people asking for that pronto in our southwestern states. Do you want to add to that, Maria? Do you have an idea there?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great problem to solve. Well, I guess first, I love the question, because if you don't fall in love with the problem, you're never going to try to find any solution to anything. So falling in love with the problem is literally the first step for any entrepreneur, any founder. And I think we need to I need to keep falling in love with this problem constantly, because it grows. It's crazy. Yeah, solving climate change is not an easy one, but I guess from my day-to-day operations, our customers are in need for actually solutions to reduce their emissions. So we have customers, like I said, in many different industries. So we are focused on software. I think that there's a lot of opportunities in software, but we do live in a physical world, and we do need hardware, and we need actual solutions to fix those issues, right? So I would say that, or focusing on trying to find solutions for reducing emissions for these carbon intensive companies are a great way to start. And then, yeah, I would start there.
Great. Okay, there are tons of questions coming in. I'm going to jump around a little bit. There's a question from Pete, who's saying, how can we ensure that sustainable business is not only a game of the wealthy?
Maria, you're welcome to take this one first, but I'm also happy to jump in. Up to you.
Well, I guess I need to think this through a little bit, because, I would say, like, we have customers in over 60 countries, and we have a lot of customers in Latin America and Asia. Those are developing roads. They are not a game of they're definitely not, coming from just the wealthy countries. I'm not sure, maybe if they can clarify the question, what that game actually means. Is this the investment perspective, or is this the impact perspective? What actually that means? But yeah, I don't know. Gabe,
yeah, I have an interpretation of that, which I think might be related to, if you think about this being a game of the wealthy, maybe one way of articulating that is greenwashing. How do we prevent big business from profiting off of not making actual progress, and also not creating industries that don't have a demonstrable impact? I think that's a very fair question. And really, if you look at this from an early stage venture standpoint, a lot of these rules on how you measure impact and assess risk, these rules are still being written. But if you look at it in public markets, there's been a couple decades of ESG activity happening that really force companies to look at their to look at all of those environmental, social, and governance practices. Specifically on the environmental front, I'm hopeful that there will be even greater scrutiny placed on this realm. And as you look at tools like the B impact assessment, as well as others, I'm guessing that many of those evaluative tools are going to turn the screws on their clients and on the people taking those to ensure that they're less able to kind of fudge around the edges. I also think carbon offsets will eventually and possibly maybe going in a direction where it's not just good enough to make up for your pollution somewhere else in the world. So I'm hopeful that there will be deeper accountability held for all businesses.
Thank you for that. That's great. I want to circle back. There are a bunch of questions to Maria about how she got signals. Do you have a moment that you remember where you were getting signals from potential clients that you were on to something, and also or questions about how you landed on price? What were some of the techniques that you used in those moments?
Great question. Well, signals. Yeah, I think it's important to kind of get a sense of the market, market signals are sometimes very obvious, sometimes not so much. You do have also to rely a little bit on I would say, where do you're seeing this going, and kind of have a vision and an opinion about how these things are moving. So I think it's important, super important, to do market research, but then getting into, to really understand, is this a real, is there a market there? Is there a real opportunity that scales or not? And then when you get into the customer signal, that's really like, would you pay for this or not? You have to ask that. And how much would you pay? And then this is, it's this, there is no gray area there. It's like you have to have a confirmation that there is a business there or not, right? So talking about market, I think it might be a little more abstract, but talking about product and how you are delivering the solution is very straightforward. And then getting into pricing, well, I guess we're still trying to figure it out. It's not the pricing, I think it's definitely a science, but it can be an art at the beginning, because you do need to understand what is the most cost-effective price. Well, I would say at the beginning, getting people paying for it is already good enough. And then as you grow the business, you have to think about the unit economics and how this actually, plays out as a healthy business, not something that we're paying to work. So, and price evolves over time. So I wouldn't think too much of, at the beginning, just get people paying for it. It's really what matters.
Yeah. I think that's great. But showing people things, asking for willingness to pay, and then seeing, do they really do it? Yeah. Fantastic. I'm going to bounce around just like a little speed round, because there are so many things in so many different directions. For Gabe, we have someone asking, do you know of any interesting companies in sustainable systems around food, pushing the needle, making sector level change in food in the US?
Yeah, I know, Suze, you mentioned it. We were early investors in Beyond Meat. They were the first to market, first to go public, creating a plant-based burger that tastes like a burger. And Ethan Brown's big innovation was to take it out of the novelty food section and to place it in the meat case next to Angus. And the idea was to convince people who were not vegetarians, but who just wanted a great burger without the carbon, without as much carbon at least, and a little bit more humanity, to make that choice. That's one. Another is Miyoko's Creamery. Miyoko Schinner started a plant-based dairy company making butters and cheeses. Her butters are being used by Michelin star chefs. They are plant-based products and they are exceptional, and I highly recommend those. And the idea is really one of a bigger push, especially for a lot of these sustainable systems like companies, to create products that are where there is not a compromise, or you're not asking for a compromise. You're creating products that compete on their functional and emotional benefits with the quote unquote original. You see this with what happened with Tesla. Tesla just makes a better car. It's faster, it's safer, it looks better. Nest makes a better thermostat. It saves you money and it looks a lot better. It just so happens that both of them are exponentially better for the environment. So same thing happening in the food space with Beyond Meat and Miyoko's.
Nice. Thank you. Time is just spinning by so fast. I always get the last question, and I want to take it to a slightly more personal place. I think both of you have had such fascinating careers, and I'm curious to ask each of you, if you were to be able to go back in time and be who you are now, but give yourself, 10, 20 years ago advice about what you wish you knew now, what would that advice be? Maria, why don't we start with you?
Yes. What the advice of my younger self would be: trust your gut. I think a lot of my decisions are, I like I said, I try to put a rationale behind so many things, and I think it's important to get a number and to put numbers on things. But at the same time, there's this this art that it's behind all of this, that it's so much needed, which is your sense, your perception, and your trust, and you have to keep moving. I think that's what have kept me, so for so long, and trusting. Yes. The
That's
gut.
beautiful. That's beautiful. What about you, Gabe?
Mine is, it's the other side of the coin of Maria's, which building on hers, it's just get started sooner.
Yeah.
I mentioned fires before. I co-founded a organization to end the mega fire crisis. Wish I had done it a little bit sooner. And it was the same thing earlier in my career. If you see something and you get conviction on it, go do it.
Thank you. So get started, trust your gut. Thank you, both of you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today and for bringing all of your questions. We've been talking with Maria Fujihara, the founder of SINAI Technologies, Gabe Kleinman, head of portfolio services and marketing at Obvious Ventures. If you are starting your own business, hopefully in the space of sustainable systems, or maybe you were already started something, I encourage you to check out our course, Designing a Business. You can learn more at IDEOU.com/business design. Thank you, everyone, and I will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.